recognized.
Madam Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Kentucky for yielding the customary 30 minutes. With all the very real issues facing our great nation, it's really disappointing that once again the House majority has decided to waste valuable time and resources to promote a bunch of half-baked legislative ideas and stir the culture wars pot with MAGA conspiracy theories. The bills that we started considering yesterday in the Rules Committee and will debate and vote upon in the next couple days, consuming an entire week of scarce legislative time, will do nothing to address the most pressing issues our constituents are begging us to address: gun violence, affordable health and child care, the growing impact of climate change, Social Security solvency, immigration, national security, and worse, the anti-government philosophy inspiring these bills will ultimately harm Americans by creating dangerous bottlenecks in critical government functions, misrepresenting the role and actions of the federal government, and disrupting the government's ability to protect Americans from harm. So let's get some facts straight. While our colleagues across the aisle have framed their argument as necessary to ensure that Congress exercises its legislative function, they completely ignore the fact that the federal agencies and rulemaking processes they're attacking have been established by Congress to undertake specific functions. That includes rulemaking, which is delegated to the agencies by Congress and ensures that they implement policies using the best and most recent expertise available for the benefit of the American people. By enlisting the assistance of federal agencies to administer the laws that it passes, Congress fulfills its constitutional mandate, the mandate for our entire government to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to our colleagues. In other words, working together with the other branches, our government is charged with accomplishing certain basic goals for the American people. The regulatory process that our colleagues seek to frame as a battle against a vast bureaucratic conspiracy is actually an essential part of ensuring that we all have clean air and water to breathe and drink, healthy food to eat, safe planes, trains, and automobiles to travel in. In reality, regulations mean that when a senior goes to the pharmacy to pick up their prescriptions, the life-saving medication that they'll take is both safe and effective. When you boil it down, rules and regulations are extremely tangible ways that the federal government protects people's health and safety and helps create a fairer economy where everyone has the chance to succeed. Subject matter experts at agencies craft these regulations, many based on highly complex and technical data. Once a rule is proposed, it undergoes an often years-long rigorous review in which comments are solicited from the public, business interests, and other agencies. And of course, these rules and regs are issued in response to congressional directives. They're an important step towards implementing laws that members of this body have passed while representing the people back home who elect them to come here. And we can see examples of successful rulemaking all the time across the country. Before the Clean Water Act, the Delaware River, which runs alongside my district, was so polluted that it stripped the paint off passing ships. These days, you can safely kayak on the river thanks to regulations developed by agencies to carry out that law. While the regulatory process can always be improved upon, the proposals we're considering today are not good faith improvements or efforts to provide checks upon the regulatory process. The first of these bills is H.R. 277, the Reins Act, which would turn the administrative rulemaking process on its head, requiring every major rule, of which there are dozens and sometimes hundreds every year, to be passed again by both houses of Congress and signed by the President. Remember, these rules have been developed in the first instance as a result of congressional action. So what the Reins Act is really doing is creating a process that will cause gridlock that then Republicans or other political operatives can take advantage of to stop rules they don't like. The burdensome requirements of H.R. 277 are simply not needed because Congress already has multiple opportunities to shape or rescind major rules if it disapproves of them. We can hold hearings and offer public comment. We can disapprove major regulations before they take effect. Or we can rescind those regulations under the Congressional Review Act. On the last point in particular, I'll note that this majority has moved these types of measures through this chamber already many times this Congress. In addition, we can also pass legislation to change laws or regulations if we so please. And of course, we're considering bills today to do just that. I know my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are aware of the avenues through which Congress can review and reverse rules. I know it because they use them, or try to use them, week in and week out. So for them to paint a bill like the Reins Act as a noble effort to empower Congress, it's disingenuous. And ultimately, it diverts attention from the disastrous consequences this legislation would actually create. Effectively, the Reins Act nullifies all new rulemaking by any administration, whether Republican or Democrat, and it would bring government operations to a standstill. Any new regulation would have to be passed by Congress in order to take effect. So let's think about what that would really mean. A Congress with a House majority that would rather bring the country to the brink of default instead of paying bills that Congress has already approved would have to vote on every new major regulation from every federal agency. And if that doesn't scare you, the Senate, hardly a model of expeditious legislation, would need to do the same. In addition, the bill might actually be unconstitutional because it creates a mechanism in which one House of Congress can effectively veto an agency's rule by simply not acting on it within a 70-day legislative time frame. This, in effect, is indistinguishable from the one House legislative veto that the Supreme Court held to be unconstitutional in Immigration and Naturalization Service versus Chadha. The unfortunate truth is Congress struggles every day to meet the most pressing needs of the American people. There aren't enough hours in the day, year, or congressional term for us to weigh in on all the regulations that we would need to implement the laws that we are passing. Under this policy, crucial regulations would be left to languish unacted upon, and the health, safety, and welfare of the people we're supposed to serve would be in jeopardy. In addition to the Reins Act, there are 3 other bills that my colleagues are pushing through today, which would also undermine the regulatory process and threaten public welfare and safety. H.R. 288, the SOPR Act, eliminates the decades-long standard for judicial review of agency decisions. That's a precedent that rests in part on the understanding that Congress delegates to agencies certain authorities to carry out the laws that it passes. It's clear that all the talk on the other side of the aisle about this being to restore power to Congress is empty words, because this bill actually incentivizes unelected judges, not Congress, to make and enact policy from the bench. And ultimately, it would slow the rulemaking process and skew it towards more powerful, well-funded, and often corporate litigants, which may be the point. Finally, the 2 gas stove bills that our colleagues are pushing this week actually demonstrate some of the flaws in the Reins Act, chief among them the ready availability of alternatives to the Reins Act proposal and the dangers of politicizing the rulemaking process. H.R. 1615 and 1640 are fear-mongering attempts to prevent the enactment of standards to make gas stoves more safe and efficient, and would hinder agencies' abilities to address potentially dangerous consumer products. The majority's trumped-up battle to defend gas stoves from the federal government is nothing more than a conspiracy theory, cooked up to embroil Congress in culture wars that shed more heat than light on the issues facing our nation, and are likely done so with a healthy helping of fossil fuel lobbying dollars. Contrary to the heated rhetoric from our colleagues across the aisle, the federal government has not proposed to remove appliances from Americans' homes. That pervasive falsehood has been repeated for months by partisan hacks like Tucker Carlson to stoke grievances and cause chaos. H.R. 1640, the Save Our Stoves Act, nullifies new, congressionally mandated energy efficiency standards for gas stoves, for new gas stoves only, that would save consumers up to $1.7 billion in energy bills and cut down on emissions that are being shown to be particularly dangerous to children's health. Most of us are familiar with these energy efficiency standards, and we rely upon them when we purchase new appliances like stoves and freezers and furnaces. I know that I do, because it's the responsible thing to do as a consumer from both an environmental and an economic perspective. Contrary to my colleagues' assertions, half of the gas stoves on the market today would meet the standard, and the remainder would have 3 years to make the necessary and already available adjustments to bring their new stoves into compliance. H.R. 1615, the Gas Stoves and Freedom Act, is even worse because it threatens the government's ability to identify and regulate unsafe gas stoves, including those with design defects that could cause injury or death to American consumers. Just last year, the Consumer Product Safety Commission recalled a gas stove that had sent multiple people to the hospital and placed many more at serious risk of illness or death from carbon monoxide poisoning. This bill would have prevented the recall of that dangerous appliance and would prevent the Consumer Product Safety Commission from addressing other dangerous appliances in the future. It's simply irresponsible to jeopardize the health and safety of Americans in order to promote conspiracy theories for the far right. Overall today, my Republican colleagues take a misguided approach to the issues facing rulemaking and federal regulations. It's clear they don't want to make the government work better. They want to break it. They'd rather allow polluters and corporations to wreak havoc on our environment, children's health, and working people's livelihoods. They'd prefer to decimate a regulatory process that improves the lives of Americans every single day. The federal government has long played an important role in promoting the health, safety, and welfare of the American people, and we need to ensure that it can continue playing that role. I strongly oppose these bills, and I reserve the remainder of my time.
The gentlelady from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from